Hey everyone, welcome back to Hands on Books. If this is your first time here, the idea behind the show is to share my favorite hobby, which is collecting books. So we've got a big stack of unopened, mostly used books here that we pick from at random and see what we get. Let's get started. All right, let's open one. Okay, a big one. I don't want to hurt the corner. Okay, so this one is obviously packed really well. Oh wow, I'm not even close. Another layer. This one better be good. That's probably going to sound terrible on the recording. Just stop doing that. Okay, I think we're there. Slipcase, that's a good sign. Kim by Kipling. This is like one of my absolute favorite books. And my mom introduced it to me when I was really young. And I think it's probably the first, like, my introduction to India. Or, like, my first, or I don't know, maybe like the Jungle Book movies were my first, like, even realization that India existed. But this book really, it's like one of the best adventure stories ever written. And it's set during. Actually, let me just start. Maybe there's some background info, but it's set during the Great Game, where you have the British in India essentially having this decades-long espionage, like Cold War in Central Asia with the Russians in Afghanistan and stuff like that. Oh, awesome! And this is a Heritage Press edition. This awesome artwork. Yeah, so the story is set in British India under the Raj in I guess it'd probably be like the late 1800s, and you have the Russians and the British sort of competing with each other over influence over Afghanistan and the passes through the huge mountain ranges there that lead down into India. So presumably this is Kim, and the main character is this orphaned white boy of like Irish parents that either died or abandoned him or something like that. And so he just grows up on the streets of Lahore and just sort of learns every learns all of the mannerisms and ways of being of all the different peoples that he runs across until he becomes like a natural sort of shapeshifter, and he gets taken into the service of the British, and eventually, has all these insane, amazing adventures and all over India. And I remember the descriptions of the Grand Trunk Road really stuck with me since I was a little kid, where the Grand Trunk Road, I think, like stretched from Afghanistan to like Calcutta, maybe, I can't remember, some city on the ocean, and stretched all the way across India. And the parts of this story where Kim is traveling along with whoever he's with on the Grand Trunk Road, and he's just seeing all of this procession, this endless procession of humanity and all these different types of people. And I remember at the very beginning of the story, he starts outside of this, they call it the Wonder House. It was like this museum or something like that, and playing on this big gun at the beginning. And I think all this stuff is sort of based on real places. Now, let me smell it first off. Oh, it smells amazing. Wait, let me see how old this is. I forgot to look. Okay, 1962. Maybe. That's when the copyright is. I'm not actually sure when the book was written. So let me actually read. So, Kim by Rudyard Kipling, with an introduction by Charles Edmund Carrington and illustrations by Robin Jakes. He was the same, or she was the same illustrator as Satires of Lucian, which we did a couple episodes ago. That's cool. So, yeah, and Kim meets this Tibetan Lama that's on his own quest for enlightenment, and they become like friends, and it's a great character, and it's just full of incredible, colorful adventures. And it's also sort of like it's good for kids because the character's young enough that they can sort of relate with him, and it's kind of like a coming of age story too, set against this incredible like historical backdrop of the great game. Let me read a little bit of the introduction. Rudyard Kipling's reputation had reached its climax in 1900 when he published Kim, his valediction to British India. He was still no more than 34 years old, rich and famous, and, though so young, he had enjoyed an almost unparalleled popularity for about 10 years. No other writer of the day was so widely quoted, so generally discussed, so publicly criticized. When, 10 years earlier, he had arrived in London, a penniless young journalist with a budget of stories and ballads written in India, he had quickly become the talk of the town. Since Byron, on the publication of Childe Harold, had woken to find himself famous, there had been no such sensation as the impact of Kipling on the world of letters in England and in America. A bestseller in 1890, he was still to be a bestseller, in spite of the change in taste 50 or 60 years later. I don't know if I want to read more about Kipling right now. Let me just see what else is going on here. I'd rather read an introduction to Kim. Kim, like Mowgli, begins as a castaway in a ruthless world and ends as the master of its secret springs. Like the wolf child, Kim too is confronted with a choice between the world of fantasy and the world of fact, and makes the same decision. The predatory beasts, so fierce to all others, who befriend Mowgli, are reproduced as the ruffians from the underworld who become Kim's patrons. But Kim, if not so neatly contrived as the Jungle Stories, is far richer in content, not only in its bold impressions of Indian life, We must never forget that Kipling was brought up among painters, but in the variety of its dramatis personae. Bagheera the panther and Baloo the bear are slight sketches when compared with the rounded portraits of Mahbub Ali and Hari Chandra, who reveal the vagaries and contradictions of actual human beings. Kim is remarkable, too, for its portraits of women, far more deeply etched than the superficial studies of the Mem Sahibs in his early Simla stories. Not much critical attention has yet been given to Kipling's series of middle-aged women. His young girls, with one or two exceptions where he was portraying his own daughters, are not interesting, but the older women who appear so frequently in his later work are remarkable indeed. Notice, then, that Kim, this autobiographical projection of the author as a youth, accepts the motherly ministrations of the old Hindu lady, the Sahiba, as a right, but rejects the amorous advances of the women of Shamlech. It is significant that Kim, like Mowgli, is described as virile, beautiful, and desirable. Kipling takes pains to tell us that Kim has known all evil since childhood, and presents him in easy, unashamed converse with women of the town. This experience of life we do not quite believe, and rather see him as moving through corruption in unstained innocence. Women delights him not, nor man either. More significant still is the patronage of Mahbub Ali, a Pathan from a society where homosexual relations were quite respectable, who treats Kim as his, quote, favorite, an implication of which Kim seems unaware. This, too, is a view of life which he rejects. In the end, he emerges from his adolescent state of dependence, neither the favorite of a powerful patron, nor the disciple of an otherworldly cult, but a man, and a man of the Western technocratic world. Quote, roads were made to be walked upon, houses to be lived in, cattle to be driven, fields to be tilled, and men and women to be talked to. They were all real and true. To consider and to respect mysticism, but to accept material life, to know of the abnormal but to prefer the normal, to correlate the world of fancy with the world of fact, this is Kim's solution for the conflicts of adolescence, and this was Kipling's message to his generation. Hence his lasting influence over normal men, and hence the irritation which his name and message stimulate everywhere. He gets under the skins of the hypersensitive. The book, Kim, has many faults, not least the occasional jibes and sneers that Kipling could not refrain from using in his early work. Even as late as 1900, he had not learned to prune away and reject these imperfections, which, 10 years later, would not have evaded his final scrutiny. While this is a book about Indians and Indian life, with an unusual tenderness for Eurasians, and an unsympathetic view of Englishmen in India, the author occasionally drops a casual comment of so unsympathetic a character that it jars upon the surprised reader. As the caravan settled for the evening, he writes, for example, there, quote, followed the usual aimless babble that every low-caste native must raise on every occasion. If true, it is unnecessary, an irrelevant intrusion in a delightful scene, but these condescending asides about natives are mild when compared with his strictures on the uncomprehending sahibs. The character treated most harshly is the Church of England chaplain, who looked at India with the triple-ringed uninterest of the creed that lumps 9/10 of the world under the title of heathen. These are minor flaws in a masterpiece. Surely Kim is the best book written by a European about Asia. Surely no other Englishman has written of India with such loving interest. E.M. Forster's Passage to India is the only work which can be laid beside it, and, in many respects, Kim comes well out of the comparison. Kim is not a political romance. It attempts no glorification or even justification of British rule, which is merely taken for granted. Its plot is unimportant, hardly memorable. Its hero is thrown by chance into the vagabond life of India so that we may see and love the country and the people as we catch the scent of the hot dust in our nostrils. Nothing is explained or excused. Forster, not Kipling, is the political writer, the commentator on a passing phase, at which he casts his cool, austere regard. In the cold light of Forster's observation, all is clear and all unlovable. While Forster appraises the Indian character in the Indian scene, noting conscious and unconscious processes, Kipling is content to paint the picture, loving it and causing us to love it. He labored at this task for 5 years, and when, at last, he produced a third draft which satisfied him, it was his farewell to youth and to adolescent fantasy, as well as to Asia. All that was put behind him, long ago and far away, and never again did he take ship east of Suez. By C.E. Carrington. And here's the llama. It's a great character. And that's one thing I really do remember is that this book really, you smell, you feel the place. And I remember what it was like to read it when I was little. So let's read the first few pages. O ye who tread the narrow way, by Tophet flare to judgment day, be gentle when the heathen pray to Buddha at Kamakura. He sat, in defiance of municipal orders, astride the gun Zamzama on her brick platform opposite the old Ajaib Gher, the Wonder House, as the natives call the Lahore Museum. Who holds Zamzama, that fire-breathing dragon, hold the Punjab, for the great green bronze piece is always first of the conqueror's loot. There was some justification for Kim. He had kicked Lala Dinat's boy off the trunnions, since the English held the Punjab and Kim was English. Though he was burned black as any native, though he spoke the vernacular by preference, and his mother tongue an eclipsed, uncertain sing-song, though he consorted on terms of perfect equality with the boys of the bazaar, Kim was white, a poor white of the very poorest. The half-caste woman who looked after him, she smoked opium and pretended to keep a second-hand furniture shop by the square where the cheap cabs wait. Told the missionaries that she was Kim's mother's sister, but his mother had been nursemaid in a colonel's family and had married Kimball O'Hara, a young color sergeant of the Mavericks, an Irish regiment. He afterwards took a post on the Sindh, Punjab, and Delhi Railway, and his regiment went home without him. The wife died of cholera in Firozapur, and O'Hara fell to drink and loafing up and down the line with the keen-eyed 3-year-old baby. Societies and chaplains, anxious for the child, tried to catch him, but O'Hara drifted away, till he came across the woman who took opium and learned the taste from her, and died as poor whites die in India. His estate at death consisted of 3 papers. One he called his Ne Verriatur, because these words were written below his signature thereon, and another his clearance certificate. The third was Kim's birth certificate. Those things, he was used to say, in his glorious opium hours, would yet make little Kimball a man. On no account was Kim to part with them, for they belonged to a great piece of magic, such magic as men practiced over yonder behind the museum, in the big blue and white Jadoo Gher, the magic house, as we named the Masonic Lodge. It would, he said, all come right some day, and Kim's horn would be exalted between pillars, monstrous pillars, of beauty and strength. The colonel himself, riding on a horse at the head of the finest regiment in the world, would attend to Kim, little Kim that should have been better off than his father. 900 first-class devils, whose god was a red bull on a green field, would attend to Kim, if they had not forgotten O'Hara, poor O'Hara that was gang foreman on the Firozapur line. Then he would weep bitterly in the broken rush chair on the veranda. So it came about after his death that the woman sewed parchment, paper, and birth certificate into a leather amulet case which she strung around Kim's neck. And someday, she said, confusedly remembering O'Hara's prophecies, there will come for you a great red bull on a green field, and the colonel riding on his tall horse. Yes, and, dropping into English, 900 devils. Ah, said Kim, I shall remember. A red bull and a colonel on a horse will come, but first, my father said, will come the 2 men making ready the ground for these matters. That is how, my father said, they always did, and it is always so when men work magic. So good. All right, let me see what some other artwork looks like in here. So here you have Kim presumably getting some sort of disguise or makeup put on him. Oh, and this is the priest. What the guy was talking about in the introduction. The character that comes the worst off in the whole story. Cool. All right. Well, I'm excited to read some of this again, and I think I will, and I'll try to find some cool segments to come back with on a second take. All right, guys, I am back after giving myself a little while to revisit Kim, and I wanted to share some of the things that I learned in an extended reading from one of the parts of the book that I remember most vividly from reading it when I was a kid. So, first of all, this book is a Heritage Club copy, and it only cost $9 plus $4 shipping. So I wanted to give a compliment to the online store called Read Me Books on Abe Books. They packed this really, really lovingly, and I'm totally satisfied with the purchase. For $13, this book seems too good to be true. So let's look at the first thing I wanted to talk about is this opening poem, which let me just reread it. O ye who tread the narrow way, by Tophet flare to judgment day, be gentle when the heathen pray to Buddha at Kamakura. So this is just very Kipling in the sense that on a sort of surface level reading, it might even be offensive because he appears to be calling the Buddhists heathens. But with Kipling and with a lot of literature, the sentiment runs deeper than the text. And the first thing I did was look up this term Tophet because I didn't know what it meant. And this was apparently a place outside of Jerusalem where, according to the Hebrew Bible, some Jews who had lapsed into idolatry were practicing rituals of child sacrifice. There's some debate over whether it was sacrifice to Yahweh or Moloch, or whether Moloch is the name of the sacrifice or the type of the sacrifice, but the scholarly consensus appears to be that this was taking place. And of course the Bible condemns it, and it's meant to be this sort of, or I don't know what it was meant to be, but to me it seems to be like an example of something that the Jews, and by extension the Christians in that same lineage, had to overcome to become the less heathen, to use their term, faiths that they would become. So, O ye who tread the narrow way is just referring to Christians, saying like, hey, you Christians, by Tophet flare to Judgment Day, oh, you Christians who have this sort of what you would consider the worst type of heathenry in your own lineage, or oh, you Christians who hearken back to child sacrifice, be gentle when the heathen pray. Now, this could be physical, but definitely mental, kind of saying, why would you think you're better than them? So this is more like telling the Western reader to withhold his sort of judgmental, or to withhold judgment, and to sort of take stock of the background that they themselves come from whenever they consider these people in the East. And so I looked up this poem, and since it's unattributed, I figured it was something that Kipling wrote. And it turns out to be the first stanza of a longer poem called Buddha at Kamakura. And one of the first things I noticed is there are some quotation marks missing from the version in Kim, very strategic quotation marks that are around the heathen. So when you read it in the poem, it's obvious to the reader that there's a secondary meaning, or there's an indication that you're not supposed to take it literally. Also, in the poem, the whole body is in response to an epigraph at the beginning that runs, and there is a Japanese idol at Kamakura. So this is meant to be, the statement of someone that doesn't understand or respect the worship that takes place at Kamakura. Because whenever someone in the West sort of uses the word idol, then that leads you down like a referential path towards like idolatry and so forth. So Kamakura is this city in Japan where they still have this huge statue of Buddha, or a Buddha, and it was built in the 1200s. It's very cool, and I'll post a picture of it. But so this whole poem is in response to this sort of Western misunderstanding or irreverence towards this sort of religious practice. So I'll read that poem now. O ye who tread the narrow way, by Tophet flare to Judgment Day, be gentle when the heathen pray to Buddha at Kamakura. To him the way, the law apart, whom Maya held beneath her heart, Ananda's Lord, the Bodhisattva, the Buddha of Kamakura. For though he neither burns nor sees, nor hears ye thank your deities, ye have not sinned with such as these, his children at Kamakura. Yet spare us still the Western joke, when joss sticks turn to scented smoke, the little sins of little folk that worship at Kamakura. The gray-robed, gay-sashed butterflies that flit beneath the master's eyes, he is beyond the mysteries, but loves them at Kamakura. And whoso will, from pride released, contemning neither creed nor priest, may feel the soul of all the East about him at Kamakura. Yea, every tale Ananda heard of birth as fish or beast or bird, while yet in lives the master stirred, the warm wind brings Kamakura. Till drowsy eyelids seem to see a flower neath her golden tea, the Shwedagon flare easterly from Burma to Kamakura. And down the loaded air there comes the thunder of Tibetan drums, and droned O Mane Padme hums a world's width from Kamakura. Yet Brahmins rule Benares still, Bodh Gaya's ruins pit the hill, and beef-fed zealots threaten ill to Buddha in Kamakura. A tourist show, a legend told, a rusting bulk of bronze and gold. So much, and scarce so much, ye hold, the meaning of Kamakura? But when the morning prayer is prayed, think, ere ye pass to strife and trade, is God in human image made no nearer than Kamakura? So I'll post a link to an analysis of that poem if anyone's interested. And just because I can't resist tie-ins to Salammbô, a Tophet is also the term used by archaeologists to describe any of the dozens of Carthaginian sites where they have like fields of buried urns, a lot of them containing infants and sacrificial animals. So the consensus on that appears to, and it's widely attested in ancient literature, but since Carthage was so systematically destroyed by the Romans, we don't really have their side of things. So it's widely attested that the Carthaginians practiced child sacrifice, and there's been these archaeological discoveries of what we now call Tophets that have these apparently sacrificed remains of burned children. And the largest of these is in Carthage, and it's called the Tophet of Salammbô, which is a reference to Flaubert's fictional character Salammbô from his novel of the same name, the historical novel about the mercenary war, which is also one of my absolute favorite books. I'm thinking of just buying a cool copy of it so I can put it in the pile and eventually cover it on the show. Okay, so let's get to the reading. The first page that I wanted to read was just a quick paragraph, and then I'll get into the extended reading where the Lama and Kim finally make it to the Grand Trunk Road. And this first one I like just because it mentions the Himalayas, and can't read Kim without appreciating the Himalayas. They followed the rutted and worn country road that wound across the flat between the great dark green mango groves, the line of the snow-capped Himalayas faint to the eastward. All India was at work in the fields, to the creaking of well wheels, the shouting of plowmen behind their cattle, and the clamor of the crows. Even the pony felt the good influence and almost broke into a trot as Kim laid a hand on the stirrup leather. And now, let me get to this part. So, just to give a little context to the story, this is after Kim and the Lama have left Lahore, and Kim is sort of serving as his street smart escort, in the sense that he's protecting him from all the scammers on the road and all these people that would take advantage of the Lama, who himself is on this quest to find a river that once he finds it, I think it would like bestow some sort of enlightenment. The third character in this segment at the start is this soldier who's showing them the way to the Grand Trunk Road. And the soldier is asking him to explain his quest for this river. "Speak then, old man." The soldier smiled, half saluting. "We be all babblers at our age." The Lama squatted under the shade of a mango, whose shadow played checkerwise over his face. The soldier sat stiffly on the pony, and Kim, making sure that there were no snakes, lay down in the crotch of the twisted roots. There was a drowsy buzz of small life and hot sunshine, a cooing of doves, and a sleepy drone of well wheels across the fields. Slowly and impressively the Lama began. At the end of 10 minutes, the old soldier slid from his pony, to hear better as he said, and sat with the reins round his wrist. The Lama's voice faltered. The periods lengthened. Kim was busy watching a gray squirrel. When the little scolding bunch of fur, close pressed to the branch, disappeared, preacher and audience were fast asleep. The old officer's strong-cut head pillowed on his arm. The Lama's thrown back against the tree bole, where it showed like yellow ivory. A naked child toddled up, stared, and moved by some quick impulse of reverence, made a solemn little obeisance before the Lama. Only the child was so short and fat that it toppled over sideways, and Kim laughed at the sprawling, chubby legs. The child, scared and indignant, yelled aloud. "Hi, hi," said the soldier, leaping to his feet. "What is it? What orders? It is a child. I dreamed it was an alarm, little one. Little one, do not cry. Have I slept? That was discourteous indeed." "I fear, I am afraid," roared the child. "What is it to fear? 2 old men and a boy. How wilt thou ever make a soldier, princeling?" The Lama had waked too, but taking no direct notice of the child, clicked his rosary. "What is that?" said the child, stopping a yell midway. "I have never seen such things. Give them me." "Aha," said the Lama, smiling, and trailing a loop of it on the grass. "This is a handful of cardamoms. This is a lump of ghee. This is millet and chilies and rice, a supper for thee and me." The child shrieked with joy and snatched at the dark, glancing beads. "Oho," said the old soldier, "whence had thou that song, despiser of this world?" "I learned it in Pathankot, sitting on a doorstep," said the Lama shyly. "It is good to be kind to babes." "As I remember, before the sleep came on us, thou hadst told me that marriage and bearing were darkeners of the true light, stumbling blocks upon the way. Do children drop from heaven in thy country? Is it the way to sing them songs?" "No man is all perfect," said the Lama gravely, recoiling the rosary. "Run now to thy mother, little one." "Hear him," said the soldier to Kim. "He is ashamed for that he has made a child happy. There was a very good householder lost in thee, my brother. Hide, child." He threw it a pice. Sweetmeats are always sweet. And as the little figure capered away into the sunshine, they grow up and become men. "Holy One, I grieve that I slept in the midst of thy preaching. Forgive me." "We be 2 old men," said the Lama. "The fault is mine. I listened to thy talk of the world and its madness, and one fault led to the next." "Hear him. What harm did thy God suffer from play with a babe?" "And that song was very well sung. Let us go on, and I will sing thee the song of Nikau Sain before Delhi, the old song." And they flared out from the gloom of the mango tope, the old man's high, shrill voice ringing across the field, as wail by long-drawn wail he unfolded the story of Nicholson, the song that men sing in the Punjab to this day. Kim was delighted, and the Lama listened with deep interest. "Ahi, Nicholson is dead. He died before Delhi. Lances of North take vengeance for Nicholson." He quavered it out to the end, marking the trills with the flat of his sword on the pony's rump. "And now we come to the big road," said he, after receiving the compliments of Kim, for the Lama was markedly silent. "It is long since I have ridden this way, but thy boy's talk stirred me. See, Holy One, the great road, which is the backbone of all Hind. For the most part it is shaded, as here, with 4 lines of trees. The middle road, all hard, takes the quick traffic. In the days before rail carriages, the sahibs traveled up and down here in hundreds. Now there are only country carts and such like. Left and right is the rougher road for the heavy carts, grain and cotton and timber, busa, lime, and hides. A man goes in safety here, for at every few koes is a police station. The police are thieves and extortioners. I myself would patrol it with cavalry, young recruits under a strong captain. But at least they do not suffer any rivals. All castes and kinds of men move here. Look, Brahmins and Chumars, bankers and tinkers, barbers and bunnias, pilgrims and potters, all the world coming and going. It is to me as a river from which I am withdrawn like a log after a flood. And truly the Grand Trunk Road is a wonderful spectacle. It runs straight, bearing without crowding India's traffic for 1,500 miles. Such a river of life as nowhere else exists in the world. They looked at the green arch, shade-flecked length of it, the white breadth speckled with slow-pacing folk, and the 2-roomed police station opposite. "Who bears arms against the law?" a constable called out laughingly, as he caught sight of the soldier's sword. "Are not the police enough to destroy evildoers?" "It was because of the police I bought it," was the answer. "Does all go well in Hind?" "Resaldar Sahib, all goes well." "I am like an old tortoise, look you, who puts his head out from the bank and draws it in again. Aye, this is the road of Hindustan. All men come by this way." "Son of a swine, is the soft part of the road meant for thee to scratch thy back upon? Father of all the daughters of shame and husband of 10,000 virtuous ones, thy mother was devoted to a devil, being led thereto by her mother. Thy aunts have never had a nose for 7 generations. Thy sister, what owl's folly told thee to draw thy carts across the road? A broken wheel? Then take a broken head and put the two together at leisure." The voice and a venomous whip cracking came out of a pillar of dust 50 yards away, where a cart had broken down. A thin, high Kathiawar mare, with eyes and nostrils aflame, rocketed out of the jam, snorting and wincing as a rider bent her across the road in chase of a shouting man. He was tall and gray-bearded, sitting the almost mad beast as a piece of her, and scientifically lashing his victim between plunges. The old man's face lit with pride. "My child," said he briefly, and strove to rein the pony's neck to a fitting arch. "Am I to be beaten before the police?" cried the carter. "Justice! I will have justice!" "Am I to be blocked by a shouting ape who upsets 10,000 sacks under a young horse's nose? This is the way to ruin a mare." "He speaks truth, he speaks truth. But she follows her man close," said the old man. The carter ran under the wheels of his cart, and thence threatened all sorts of vengeance. "They are strong men, thy sons," said the policeman serenely, picking his teeth. The horseman delivered one last vicious cut with his whip and came on at a canter. "My father!" He reined back 10 yards and dismounted. The old man was off his pony in an instant, and they embraced, as do father and son in the East. Now on to chapter 4. There's a poem at the beginning. "Good luck, she is never a lady, but the cursedest queen alive, tricksy, wincing, and jady, kittle to lead or drive. Greet her, she's hailing a stranger. Meet her, she's busking to leave. Let her alone for a shrew to the bone, and the hussy comes plucking your sleeve. Largesse, largesse, O fortune, give her hold at your will. If I've no care for fortune, fortune must follow me still." That's attributed to the wishing caps. Then, lowering their voices, they spoke together. Kim came to rest under a tree, and the llama tugged impatiently at his elbow. "Let us go on, then. The river is not here." "Hai mai, have we not walked enough for a little? Our river will not run away. Patience, and he will give us a dole." "That," said the old soldier suddenly, "is the friend of the stars. He brought me the news yesterday, having seen the very man himself, in a vision, giving orders for the war." Said his son, all deep in his broad chest. "He came by a bizarre rumor and made profit of it." His father laughed. "At least he did not ride to me begging for a new charger and the gods know how many rupees." "Are thy brother's regiments also under orders?" "I do not know. I took leave and came swiftly to thee in case they ran before thee to beg. O gamblers and spendthrifts all! But thou hast never yet ridden in a charge. A good horse is needed there, truly. A good follower and a good pony also for the marching. Let us see, let us see." He thrummed on the pommel. "This is no place to cast accounts in, my father. Let us go to thy house. At least pay the boy then. I have no pice with me, and he brought auspicious news. Ho, friend of all the world, a war is toward, as thou hast said." "Nay, as I know, the war," returned Kim composedly. "Eh?" said the llama, fingering his beads, all eager for the road. "My master does not trouble the stars for hire. We brought the news. Bear witness we brought the news, and now we go." Kim half crooked his hand at his side. The sun tossed a silver coin through the sunlight, grumbling something about beggars and jugglers. It was a 4 anna piece, and would feed them well for some days. The llama, seeing the flash of the metal, droned a blessing. "Go thy way, friend of all the world," piped the old soldier, wheeling his scrawny mount. "For once in all my days I have met a true prophet who was not in the army." Father and son swung round together, the old man sitting as erect as the younger. A Punjabi constable in yellow linen trousers slouched across the road. He had seen the money pass. "Halt!" he cried in impressive English. "Know ye not that there is a tax of 2 annas a head, which is 4 annas, on those who enter the road from this side road? It is the order of the Sirkar, and the money is spent for the planting of trees and the beautification of the ways." "And the bellies of the police," said Kim, skipping out of arm's reach. "Consider for a while, man with a mud head. Think you we came from the nearest pond like the frog, thy father-in-law? Hast thou ever heard the name of thy brother?" "And who was he? Leave the boy alone," cried a senior constable, immensely delighted, as he squatted down to smoke his pipe in the veranda. "He took a label from a bottle of Beleti Pani, soda water, and, affixing it to a bridge, collected taxes for a month from those who passed, saying that it was the Sirkar's order. Then came an Englishman and broke his head. Ah, brother, I am a town crow, not a village crow." The policeman drew back abashed, and Kim hooted at him all down the road. "Was there ever such a disciple as I?" he cried merrily to the Lama. "All earth would have picked thy bones within 10 miles of Lahore city, if I had not guarded thee." "I consider in my own mind whether thou art a spirit sometimes, or sometimes an evil imp," said the Lama, smiling slowly. "I am thy chela." Kim dropped into step at his side, that indescribable gait of the long-distance tramp all the world over. "Now let us walk," muttered the Lama, and to the click of his rosary they walked in silence mile upon mile. The Lama, as usual, was deep in meditation, but Kim's bright eyes were open wide. This broad, smiling river of life, he considered, was a vast improvement on the cramped and crowded Lahore streets. There were new people and new sights at every stride, castes he knew and castes that were altogether out of his experience. They met a troop of long-haired, strong-scented Sansis, with baskets of lizards and other unclean food on their backs, their lean dogs sniffing at their heels. These people kept their own side of the road, moving at a quick, furtive jog-trot, and all other castes gave them ample room, for the Sansi is deep pollution. Behind them, walking wide and stiffly across the strong shadows, the memory of his leg irons still on him, strode one newly released from the jail, his full stomach and shiny skin to prove that the government fed its prisoners better than most honest men could feed themselves. Kim knew that walk well, and made broad jest of it as they passed. Then an Akali, a wild-eyed, wild-haired Sikh devotee in the blue-checked clothes of his faith, with polished steel quoits glistening on the cone of his tall blue turban, stalked past, returning from a visit to one of the independent Sikh states, where he had been singing the ancient glories of the Khalsa to college-trained princelings in top boots and white-cord breeches. Kim was careful not to irritate that man, for the Akali's temper is short and his arm quick. Here and there they met or were overtaken by the gaily dressed crowds of whole villages turning out to some local fair. The women, with their babes on their hips, walking behind them, and the older boys prancing on sticks of sugar cane, dragging rude brass models of locomotives such as they sell for a halfpenny, or flashing the sun into the eyes of their betters from cheap toy mirrors. One could see at a glance what each had bought, and if there were any doubt it needed only to watch the wives comparing, brown arm against brown arm, the newly purchased dull glass bracelets that come from the Northwest. These merrymakers stepped slowly, calling one to the other and stopping to haggle with sweetmeat sellers, or to make a prayer before one of the wayside shrines, sometimes Hindu, sometimes Mussulman, which the low caste of both creeds share with beautiful impartiality. A solid line of blue, rising and falling like the back of a caterpillar in haste, would swing up through the quivering dust and trot past to a chorus of quick cackling. That was a gang of Changars, the women who have taken all the embankments of all the northern railways under their charge. A flat-footed, big-bosomed, strong-limbed, blue-petticoated clan of earth carriers, hurrying north on news of a job, and wasting no time by the road. They belong to a caste whose men do not count, and they walked with square elbows, swinging hips, and heads on high, as suits women who carry heavy weights. A little later a marriage procession would strike into the Grand Trunk with music and shoutings, and a smell of marigold and jasmine stronger even than the reek of the dust. One could see the bride's litter, a blur of red and tinsel, staggering through the haze, while the bridegroom's bereathed pony turned aside to snatch a mouthful from a passing fodder cart. Then Kim would join the Kentish fire of good wishes and bad jokes, wishing the couple 100 sons and no daughters, as the saying is. Still more interesting and more to be shouted over it was when a strolling juggler with some half-trained monkeys, or a panting, feeble bear, or a woman who tied goat's horns to her feet, and with these dancing on a slack rope, set the horses to shying and the women to shrill, long-drawn quavers of amazement. The llama never raised his eyes. He did not note the moneylender on his goose-rumped pony, hastening along to collect the cruel interest, or the long-shouting, deep-voiced little mob, still in military formation, of native soldiers on leave, rejoicing to be rid of their breeches and puttees, and saying the most outrageous things to the most respectable women in sight. Even the seller of Ganges water he did not see, and Kim expected that he would at least buy a bottle of that precious stuff. He looked steadily on the ground, and strode as steadily hour after hour, his soul busied elsewhere. But Kim was in the seventh heaven of joy. The Grand Trunk at this point was built on an embankment to guard against winter floods from the foothills, so that one walked, as it were, a little above the country, along a stately corridor, seeing all India spread out to left and right. It was beautiful to behold the many-yoked grain and cotton wagons crawling over the country roads. One could hear their axles complaining a mile away, coming nearer, till with shouts and yells and bad words they climbed up the steep incline and plunged on to the hard main road, carter reviling carter. It was equally beautiful to watch the people, little clumps of red and blue and pink and white and saffron, turning aside to go to their own villages, dispersing and growing small by twos and threes across the level plain. Kim felt these things, though he could not give tongue to his feelings, and so contented himself with buying peeled sugar cane and spitting the pith generously about his path. From time to time the llama took snuff, and at last Kim could endure the silence no longer. "This is a good land, the land of the south," said he. "The air is good, the water is good, eh?" "And they are all bound upon the wheel," said the llama, "bound from life after life. To none of these has the way been shown." He shook himself back to this world. "And now we have walked a weary way," said Kim. "Surely we shall soon come to a parao, a resting place. Shall we stay there? Look, the sun is sloping." "Who will receive us this evening?" "That is all one. This country is full of good folk. Besides," he sunk his voice beneath a whisper, "we have money." The crowd thickened as they neared the resting place which marked the end of their day's journey. A line of stalls selling very simple food and tobacco, a stack of firewood, a police station, a well, a horse trough, a few trees, and under them some trampled ground dotted with the black ashes of old fires, are all that mark a parao on the Grand Trunk, if you except the beggars and the crows, both hungry. By this time the sun was driving broad golden spokes through the lower branches of the mango trees. The parakeets and doves were coming home in their hundreds. The chattering, gray-backed 7 sisters, talking over the day's adventures, walked back and forth in twos and threes almost under the feet of the travelers, and shufflings and scufflings in the branches showed that the bats were ready to go out on the night picket. Swiftly the light gathered itself together, painted for an instant the faces and the cartwheels and the bullocks' horns as red as blood. Then the night fell, changing the touch of the air, drawing a low, even haze, like a gossamer veil of blue, across the face of the country, and bringing out, keen and distinct, the smell of wood smoke, and cattle, and the good scent of wheaten cakes cooked on ashes. The evening patrol hurried out of the police station with important coughings and reiterated orders, and a live charcoal ball in a cup of a wayside carter's hookah glowed red, while Kim's eye mechanically watched the last flicker of the sun on the brass tweezers. incredible. I love this book. Kipling's descriptive powers are just one of a kind to me. And here's a beautiful illustration by Robin Jakes of all the different sorts of people that you could come across on the Grand Trunk Road. And this is maybe the wedding procession. Maybe the bride is in this palanquin. So yeah, if you haven't picked up Kim, I cannot recommend it enough. And if you haven't ever gotten a Heritage Club book, which I never have, I collect Folio Society books, so I started looking at brands that were sort of comparable to Folio Society that you could get, old classic hardback versions. And Heritage Club came up, and so did the Limited Editions Club. I don't know if either of these publications still exist. Maybe not, but Folio Society still exists. So that's one to check out if you like brand new versions of books like this. And here on the front cover, we can see Kim and the llama with the Himalayas in the background. Just a beautiful book. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this episode. Thanks for checking out the show if you made it this far. If it's something you liked, please consider subscribing and liking the video, sharing it with your friends, all that good stuff. And until next time, happy reading.